Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. It started on a rainy afternoon in downtown Brooklyn. The streets shimmered with reflections of passing headlights, and a faint scent of rain mixed with fresh flowers drifted through the narrow alleys. Maya Carter, 24 years old, stood under the awning of her tiny flower stand. The petals were bruised from the wind, and the sign that said Maya's Blooms leaned sideways, ready to give up just like her. She counted the last of her crumpled bills, barely enough for rent. Her fingers were numb from the cold, but her spirit was colder. That was when a black car pulled up to the curb, sleek, spotless, completely out of place among the puddles and paper cups rolling in the gutter. The door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, sharply dressed, with the kind of posture that did not belong to this part of the city. He carried no umbrella, yet the rain seemed to slide off him as if even the weather knew better than to touch him. "Are you still open?" he asked, his voice slow and even. Maya hesitated, studying him. His watch probably cost more than her entire stand. Still, business was business. "Depends on what you need," she said. "Roses? Peonies?" He shook his head. "Something simple. Something real." His gaze dropped to a single white peony that she had kept aside, the only flower she could not sell because it reminded her of her mother. "That one," he said, pointing. Maya frowned. "It is not for sale." "Everything has a price," he replied. "Not this," she said quietly, wrapping her arms around herself. He looked at her for a moment, then smiled, not cruelly but curiously, as if she had passed a test she did not know she was taking. "Good," he said, turning to leave. "Keep it that way." He paused under the rain, then looked back. "Your name is Maya, right?" She blinked, startled. "How do you know that?" "It is on your sign," he said, a trace of humor in his tone.
"See you soon, Maya." The car door closed, and the taillights disappeared into the gray blur. She stood there for a long time, clutching the single white peony. 2 days later, a letter arrived at her stand, sealed with embossed silver wax. Inside was one line: "I need your help. Meet me at the Atlas Tower, 7:00 p.m. No signature, no explanation, just an address that led to one of the tallest buildings in New York City. She almost threw it away, but something in her gut whispered otherwise. That night, she found herself standing at the marble entrance of Atlas Tower, drenched from the drizzle, her heart thudding. The receptionist looked up. "Miss Carter?" Maya froze. "Yes. Mr. Adrian Cole is expecting you." The name hit her like thunder. Adrian Cole, the billionaire who practically owned half the skyline. Before she could think, she was in the elevator, rising floor after floor until the city lights spread beneath her like stars. When the doors opened, he was there, the man from the rain, leaning casually against his desk. "You came," he said softly. "I was not sure you would." She folded her arms. "You sent a letter with no reason. Why am I here?" He stepped closer, his presence almost disarming. "Because I have a proposition. I need a wife." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unbelievable. "You need what?" she asked. "Not a real one," he continued, his tone businesslike. "A temporary one. A contract marriage. 7 days. She laughed once, bitter and disbelieving. "This is some kind of joke, right?" "No joke," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Read it. I'm offering you enough money to open your dream shop anywhere in the city. In return, you help me protect a business deal that depends on my perfect marriage image." Maya stared at the papers, then at him. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "You are honest. You do not pretend. That is rare where I come from." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, lightning flashed over the skyline, painting them both in silver light. She finally whispered, "You can buy a ring, Mr. Cole, but you cannot buy the meaning behind it." He smiled faintly. "That is exactly why I chose you." The next morning, Maya sat at her tiny kitchen table staring at the contract again. The inked letters looked heavier than paper should ever carry. 7 days.
A marriage that was not real. Enough money to rebuild her entire life. Outside, the sound of traffic mixed with a steady drizzle against the window. She had not slept. The thought of Adrian Cole's face, calm and unreadable, kept flashing in her mind. Why her? Why a florist from a street corner? By noon, she was standing again in the marble lobby of Atlas Tower, clutching the contract. When the elevator doors opened, Adrian was already there, waiting. "You came back," he said. "That means you have an answer." She took a slow breath. "Yes. I will do it. But I want everything in writing. Every promise, every condition." He nodded once, businesslike. "You will have it. My attorney is preparing the final document." They walked into his private office, walls of glass overlooking the skyline. The view was stunning, but Maya could not look away from the folder on his desk. Inside was the official agreement, neat paragraphs describing the limits of a fake marriage. No romance. No physical involvement. Appear together at events, speak respectfully, smile when cameras flash. When she signed, Adrian extended his hand across the desk. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cole." She hesitated before shaking it. The word sounded foreign, unreal. He placed a small velvet box in front of her. Inside was a platinum ring, simple, flawless. "Wear this when you are in public," he said. "It will make the act believable." She looked at the ring but did not touch it. "It is beautiful, but it means nothing," she said softly. "Exactly," he replied. "That is the point." That evening, she was taken by car to a mansion north of the city, her temporary home. The estate looked like something from a movie, all stone and glass, surrounded by manicured gardens that smelled faintly of rain and lavender. A housekeeper named Mrs. Whitmore greeted her politely but with clear confusion, as if trying to understand why the billionaire had brought home a girl who smelled of daisies instead of perfume. Maya was shown to a room larger than her entire apartment. Everything gleamed: white linens, silver fixtures, framed art, but she felt no warmth, no trace of life. She unpacked slowly, placing her sketchbook on the nightstand, the one she used to draw flower arrangements that she would probably never sell again. Downstairs, Adrian's voice echoed faintly as he spoke to his legal team on the phone.
Words like merger, board approval, and public image floated through the air. She realized then what her role really was: a prop, a distraction, a temporary illusion. Later that night, there was a soft knock at her door. Adrian stood there, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking less like a CEO and more like a man exhausted from holding his world together. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable," he said. She nodded stiffly. "The bed could fit 3 of me. I will manage." A faint smile crossed his face. "Tomorrow, we will meet with the stylist. There is a gala on Friday. You will need to look the part." "The part of what?" she asked. "The part of someone who belongs next to me," he said quietly, then turned and walked away. When the door clicked shut, Maya sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ring on her finger. It caught the light, scattering tiny reflections across the room. In another life, she might have imagined this moment wearing a ring, living in a mansion, but not like this, not as someone's contract. She whispered to the empty room, "I hope you know what you are doing, Maya." Across the hall, Adrian stood by his window, watching the rain return, streaking down the glass like ghosts of decisions he could not undo. He had told himself it was business, that he needed her only to save his reputation and secure the deal. But as he remembered the fire in her eyes when she said no to selling the white peony, something inside him shifted. He poured a drink, but it did nothing to quiet the thought that maybe, for the first time in years, his perfect plans were beginning to feel dangerously human. The next day began with the sound of heels echoing through the marble hallway. Maya had never seen so many people rushing to make one man look perfect. A team of stylists filled the mansion, rolling in racks of designer clothes, boxes of shoes, and trays of jewelry that sparkled like tiny suns. Adrian stood near the staircase, phone in hand, his tone sharp and efficient as he managed a dozen calls at once. When he finally looked up and saw her, his voice softened just slightly. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole. Ready for your transformation?" She crossed her arms, glancing at the sea of fabric and flashing cameras. "I thought I was pretending to be your wife, not your puppet." Adrian's lips curved faintly.
In my world, there is not much difference. The stylist, a cheerful woman named Dana, took Maya by the hand. "Do not worry, dear. We will find something that feels like you." Hours passed in a blur of fabrics, hairpins, and whispered instructions. By the afternoon, the mirror reflected a version of Maya she barely recognized. The girl who once sold flowers on a windy street now stood in an emerald evening gown that shimmered with every breath. "It does not look like me," she murmured. Adrian, standing behind her, said quietly, "That is the idea. No one can know who you really are." She turned, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "And who are you, Mr. Cole, when the cameras are off?" For a heartbeat, his expression faltered, but then the mask returned. "Someone who keeps promises." That evening, they rehearsed their public story. How they met, where they fell in love, the proposal under the city lights. Each line felt like another wall between them and the truth. When she stumbled on a detail, Adrian gently corrected her, but his patience surprised her. "Do not overthink it," he said. "Just look at me like I am the only person in the room. That is all anyone wants to see." "You make it sound easy," she said. "It is not," he replied. The night of the gala arrived faster than either expected. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Flashbulbs burst as they entered arm in arm. Maya could feel her pulse pounding in her throat, but she kept smiling. Adrian whispered, "Remember, every eye in this room is watching us." The evening unfolded in waves of polite conversations, champagne toasts, and insincere compliments. Maya tried to keep up, but the language of wealth was foreign. When a board member's wife made a cruel remark about her humble background, Maya clenched her hands. Before she could respond, Adrian stepped in smoothly, his voice calm but firm. "That humble background is the reason she understands real beauty," he said. "You see, she does not decorate her life with price tags." The table fell silent. Maya glanced at him, surprised. For the first time, it did not feel like an act. As the orchestra began to play, he led her to the dance floor. "I do not dance," she whispered. "Neither do I," he said, smiling faintly. Their steps were awkward at first, but as the music wrapped around them, the room blurred away.
His hand rested at her back, steady, warm. For a fleeting moment, the contract, the money, the lies, all of it vanished. Then, just as quickly, reality returned when the press cameras clicked. Adrian leaned closer, murmuring, "Perfect. They believe it." The words stung more than she expected. Later that night, back at the mansion, Maya removed the borrowed gown and jewelry, her reflection fading back to something familiar. Adrian was in his study when she approached the door. "You did well tonight," he said without looking up. "You played the part flawlessly." "That is just it," she replied. "I'm not sure where the part ends anymore." He looked up then, really looked at her, and for once the man who owned half the city had no words. She turned away, the echo of music still haunting her steps, and whispered, "Maybe that is the problem with pretending. Sometimes it starts to feel real." The following morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floors of the mansion, painting gold on everything it touched. Maya stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The echo of the gala still lingered in her chest, the dance, the cameras, his hand at her back. She told herself it was all pretend, yet her heart had not listened. Downstairs, Adrian was already at work, surrounded by files and phone calls. His voice was steady, his focus absolute. It was as if the night before had meant nothing. When he looked up, he said, "We did well last night." The press loves the story. The merger is moving forward. She forced a smile. I'm glad your plan is working. He paused, sensing the distance in her tone. This plan benefits both of us, Maya. You will have what you came for. She nodded, but said nothing. Later, while the city hummed outside, Maya wandered into the garden behind the mansion. Rows of trimmed hedges lined a stone path that led to a fountain surrounded by lilies. It was beautiful, but lifeless, like everything in his world. She knelt, brushing her fingers over the petals, missing the scent of real soil and the laughter of the street market. When she looked up, Adrian was standing behind her, hands in his pockets. You could add color, she said, gesturing to the rows of white flowers. Not everything has to match perfectly. I like order, he replied. Order does not mean life, she said quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke.
Then he asked, why do you love flowers so much? She smiled faintly. Because they do not last. They remind me that beauty is a choice, not a guarantee. His gaze softened, and something flickered behind Ida, kind of weariness that she had not seen before. You talk like someone who has lost too much, he said. Maybe I have, she answered. But you, Adrian, you talk like someone who has forgotten what loss feels like. He said nothing. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm. Public events, charity luncheons, photo shoots, all part of the illusion. Yet each night when they returned home, the silence grew heavier. One evening, Maya found him sitting alone in his study, the city lights glinting off the glass wall behind him. You never stop working, she said. Work keeps me from thinking, he admitted. About what? She asked. He looked at her, the mask slipping just a little. About why I built all this and still feel nothing. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. Maybe because you built walls instead of a home. He exhaled, his jaw tightening. Homes fall apart. I learned that a long time ago. She wanted to ask more, but his phone buzzed, and the moment was gone. That night, as she passed his office, she noticed a photo frame turned face down on his desk. Curiosity made her lift it. Inside was a picture of a younger Adrian with a woman who looked kind, laughing beside a lake. A wedding ring glinted on her hand. Before she could process it, his voice came from the doorway. Put it down, he said quietly. She turned, startled. I did not mean to intrude. He walked in slowly. Her name was Elise. She died 7 years ago. A car accident. I stopped believing in love the same day. Maya's voice was soft. So that is why you made this deal. Because love became another business transaction. He met her gaze, and for the first time, he looked almost human. I told myself feelings complicate success. Maybe I was wrong. The air between them changed quieter, fragile. She whispered, maybe some complications are worth it. He stepped back, breaking the moment. Get some rest, Maya. Tomorrow we have another event. When he left, she sat alone in the dim light, her heart a tangle of pity and confusion. The man she thought was made of steel now looked heartbreakingly lost.
And though she had promised herself this marriage was fake, she began to fear that her heart no longer believed it. The morning after that conversation, the mansion felt quieter than usual, almost careful, as if it knew something fragile had shifted between them. Maya tried to focus on the routine, on the schedule the assistant had sent her for another charity event that evening. But her mind kept returning to Adrian's voice the night before, the way he had said her name, the way he had looked when he spoke of Elise. She wondered if the walls he had built were starting to crack. Later that day, she found him in the kitchen, standing by the window with his sleeves rolled up, pouring coffee himself. It was the first time she had seen him without his usual army of staff. You make coffee now? She teased softly. He smiled faintly. Do not tell anyone. It would ruin my reputation. She laughed for the first time in days, and the sound seemed to startle both of them. You should laugh more often, he said. It makes this place feel less like a museum. And you, she replied, should stop acting like one of the exhibits. For a moment, the tension eased. But that night, as they prepared for the event, a storm gathered over the city. The rain came hard, streaking the glass of the penthouse and filling the air with the smell of electricity. Maya stood by the window, fastening the clasp of her necklace. Adrian entered, straightening his tie, every inch the composed billionaire again. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure how to respond. The gala was held in a towering hotel ballroom downtown, filled with New York's most powerful names. As soon as they arrived, the flash of cameras hit them like lightning. Maya's heart pounded. She clung to his arm as reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Cole, is it true your wife inspired the new urban renewal project?" Adrian smiled politely. "My wife inspires many things." The words made her chest tighten. Inside, everything gleamed: gold chandeliers, crystal glasses, the hum of conversation that never stopped. During dinner, one of the investors leaned over and said with a smirk, "Your husband certainly knows how to choose wisely." "She cleans up well, Adrian." Laughter rippled around the table. Maya froze, unsure how to react. Adrian's fork paused midair.
His tone was smooth but cold as steel. "She does not need to clean up. She is already perfect." The table went silent. The investor looked embarrassed and mumbled an apology. Maya could hardly breathe. She had never been defended like that before. When she looked at him, he was already watching her, and in his eyes, for the first time, there was something more than obligation. The orchestra began to play again. Adrian leaned close and said quietly, "Dance with me." "Now?" she asked. "Now," he said. The lights dimmed, and the world seemed to fade until only the two of them remained under the chandeliers. His hand rested gently at her waist, guiding her across the floor. For a moment, she forgot the contract, forgot the cameras. She felt safe. When the song ended, applause filled the room, but all she could hear was her own heartbeat. After the event, as they walked out into the cool night, Adrian placed his jacket over her shoulders. "It is just for show," he said, but his tone betrayed him. "Then I will return it after the show ends," she replied, though neither wanted to define when that would be. Back in the car, silence stretched between them, heavy but tender. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city lights blurred through the windows like melted gold. Maya glanced at him and said softly, "You did not have to defend me." "Yes, I did," he said without looking at her. "You remind me what it means to care." She wanted to answer, but the words caught in her throat. When they reached the mansion, she slipped out of the car, heart trembling. That night, she placed his jacket neatly over the chair beside her bed. It still smelled faintly of his cologne and the storm. She touched the ring on her finger, the one that was supposed to mean nothing, and whispered to the empty room, "You are breaking the rules, Maya." Across the hall, Adrian sat in the dark, his thoughts restless. For the first time in years, he was afraid not of losing his company, but of losing something far more dangerous: the chance to feel again. The days that followed moved slower, as if the air inside the mansion had thickened with the weight of unspoken things. Maya and Adrian fell into a rhythm that was no longer entirely professional.
She started making coffee before he woke up, leaving a cup by his office door with a note that simply said, "Remember to breathe." He began coming home earlier, sometimes catching her in the garden, planting new flowers among the sterile white ones. One afternoon, he stood watching her, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a quiet smile in his eyes. "You are changing my house," he said. She glanced up, dirt on her hands, sunlight on her face. "No, I'm just teaching it to feel alive again." That night, they had dinner together without assistants or guests for the first time. The table was set simply: two plates, candles flickering between them. "Tell me something true," she said suddenly. He raised a brow. "Everything I say is true." She smiled faintly. "Something that is not about work. Something human." He hesitated, then said softly, "When I was a boy, my father used to take me to the rooftop to watch the city lights. He told me one day it would all be mine. I thought that would make me happy, but it did not." Maya looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe because what you wanted was never the city. Maybe it was just the light." The words hung in the air, fragile and warm. Later, after dinner, they found themselves standing on that same rooftop, the skyline stretching endless around them. The wind tugged at her hair, and he reached out without thinking, tucking a loose strand behind her ear. The simple touch sent a tremor through both of them. Maya, he said quietly, when this is over, when the contract ends, what will you do? She looked out at the horizon. I will open my flower shop again. A real one this time. Maybe somewhere small, but honest. I will call it Maya's Garden. He smiled. Then I will be your first customer. She turned to face him, her eyes shining in the city lights. You cannot buy everything, Adrian. I know, he said. That is why I will ask instead. Before she could respond, thunder rumbled in the distance, and rain began to fall. They stood there, not moving, letting the water blur everything else away. For a heartbeat, the entire world narrowed to the space between them. Then his phone rang, slicing through the moment. He stepped back, answering quickly, his voice shifting back to the man of power. Yes, I will handle it. No statements until I approve them. Maya turned away, hugging her arms against the cold.
When he hung up, she asked, "What happened?" His jaw tightened. Someone leaked the contract to the media. They know about us. About this arrangement. Her heart dropped. What do you mean they know? It will be everywhere by morning, he said, running a hand through his hair. They will say you used me for money. That you tricked me. But that is not true, she said, trembling. I never asked for this. I know, he said, his voice raw. But they do not care about the truth. She stepped closer. Then tell them the truth, Adrian. Tell them this was your idea. Tell them no, he interrupted. If I do that, they will destroy you. You will be humiliated in every headline. I can take the hit. I always do. She shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. You cannot protect me from everything. He met her eyes, rain running down his face. Maybe not. But I can try. The thunder grew louder as they stood there, two people trapped between lies and something that was starting to feel dangerously like love. When she finally spoke, her voice broke. You said this would only last 7 days. He nodded slowly. I know. But it stopped feeling like 7 days a long time ago. In the dark storm, his words were nearly lost, but her heart heard every one of them. By sunrise, the headlines had already spread across every screen in the city. The billionaire's fake bride. Adrian Cole's contract marriage exposed. Photos from the gala, their dance, the way he had looked at her, it was all twisted into a cruel story. Maya sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen, her heart pounding. The comments below the article cut like glass. Words like gold digger, actress, and liar filled the page. When Adrian entered, she stood up fast, tears burning her eyes. You said you could control it, she said, voice trembling. You said you would handle everything. He looked exhausted, his tie loose, his face drawn. I tried. The board is panicking. Investors are threatening to pull out. They want me to make a statement before noon. A statement, she repeated. What will you tell them? That I am a mistake you bought? His silence was answer enough. She shook her head, stepping back. You can face your empire, Adrian, but I cannot face this. I never asked for your money, I just wanted to help. He moved closer, his tone breaking.
Maya, listen to me. I am trying to protect you. By erasing me, she asked. By letting them destroy me while you stay clean? If I tell them the truth, they will drag you through every headline, he said. They will tear you apart. They already are, she whispered. The doorbell rang, sharp and relentless. Outside, camera flashes lit up the driveway like lightning. Reporters shouted her name. Maya froze, panic flooding her chest. They found me, she said, backing away from the window. Adrian placed himself between her and the door, his voice calm but firm. Pack your things. I will take you somewhere safe. No, she said, shaking her head. I'm not running. Not again. Maya, please, you want to control, she said, cutting him off. Now you have none. Before he could stop her, she opened the side door and stepped out into the rain. The cameras turned instantly, voices shouting questions that blurred together. Miss Carter, did you marry him for money? Was it all a lie? How much were you paid? Maya's hands shook, but she lifted her chin. I did not marry him for money, she said clearly. I married him because he asked for honesty, and I gave it to him. The crowd roared with more questions, but she turned and walked away, disappearing into the gray streets. Inside, Adrian stood at the window watching her leave, knowing this time he could not follow. Hours later, the board meeting began. The room was tense, filled with murmurs and cold stares. One director said sharply, "End it, Adrian. Deny everything and move on. The company must come first." Adrian's eyes darkened. The company was built on my name, and that name used to mean something. He stood, his voice steady. If I deny her, then I deny the only real thing that has happened to me in years. Gasps rippled across the room as he walked out. Outside, rain pounded the city, and somewhere in the distance, Maya was walking alone, heartbroken but free, unaware that Adrian was about to risk everything to make things right. The next morning, the city was still buzzing with the scandal, but something unexpected happened. Every major news outlet received an official statement from Adrian Cole himself. Maya woke up in her small apartment above a corner cafe, far from the mansion, and nearly dropped her cup when she saw his face on television. The anchor's voice echoed through the room.
In a shocking move, billionaire Adrian Cole admits he orchestrated the fake marriage contract, taking full responsibility for the deception. Maya stared at the screen, frozen. The footage cut to a press conference. Adrian stood before a wall of cameras, no tie, no arrogance, only quiet resolve in his eyes. "This began as a business decision," he said, his voice firm. "But it became something I did not expect. Maya Carter did not deceive me. I deceived myself. She reminded me that integrity and compassion still exist beyond profit and image. I take full accountability for every decision, and I will step down as CEO effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the reporters, questions exploded, but Adrian simply placed the microphone down and walked away. Maya's hands trembled as she turned off the television. Her phone began buzzing with messages, reporters asking for her reaction, but she ignored them all. Later that afternoon, she returned to the only place that ever felt like home, the abandoned flower stand she used to run. The paint was peeling, the wood warped from rain, but the smell of soil still lingered. As she cleaned the counter, a familiar voice came from behind her. "You should have waited for me," Adrian said softly. She turned, startled. He looked tired, rain clinging to his hair, but there was a peace in his eyes she had never seen before. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You lost everything." He shook his head. "Not everything. I lost the mask. That was long overdue." She stared at him, speechless. "You do not owe me anything," she said. "Maybe not," he replied. "But I owe myself the truth. And the truth is, I cannot go back to the man I was before I met you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. It was the same contract they had signed weeks ago, the ink faded, edges wrinkled. He tore it in half, then again, until only scraps remained, scattering into the wind. "That contract was the biggest lie of my life," he said. "So I came to offer something real." He handed her a small silver key attached to a white ribbon. "It is yours. The lease for the shop space on 5th Avenue. The sign will read Maya's Garden. No debts, no conditions. You earned it." Tears welled in her eyes. "Adrian, you cannot just—" "I can," he said gently. "Because this time, it is not charity.
It is faith." For a long moment, they stood in the rain, neither speaking. Then she stepped closer, touching his hand. "You did not need to lose your empire to find your heart," she said. He smiled faintly. Maybe that was the only way. Around them, the city kept moving, but for once, both of them stood still, the noise fading, replaced by the quiet truth that had taken them both too long to find. 1 year later, spring returned to New York City. The air carried the scent of blooming peonies, and the street that once held a forgotten flower stand now glowed with new life. A glass storefront stood where old wood had been, its sign painted softly in gold letters that read Maya's Garden. Inside, sunlight streamed through wide windows, falling across rows of flowers arranged by color-white lilies, wild daisies, and of course, the white peonies that started it all. Maya moved between the shelves, greeting customers with the same warmth she once gave strangers on the street. Her hands were steady now, her eyes calm. A small bell over the door chimed, and she looked up. Adrian stepped inside, dressed simply in a gray coat, no longer the untouchable billionaire. He smiled, holding a paper cup of coffee in one hand. "I figured you would still forget to take a break," he said. She laughed softly. "Old habits die hard." "So do old feelings," he replied, his tone gentle. She tilted her head. "How long has it been since you left everything behind?" 365 days, he said. "But who is counting?" He looked around the shop, at the walls covered in photographs of flowers and community events. "You built something real here," he said. "Something beautiful." "So did you," she said, pointing to the small logo near the counter of the Cole Foundation, quietly funding local gardens across the city. "Maybe," he said, "but I think the best thing I ever built is standing right in front of me." Maya smiled, trying to hide the way her heart was racing. "You cannot say things like that unless you mean them." "I do," he said simply. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was the platinum ring she had worn during their contract, but this time it had been engraved with 4 words, real this time. Maya. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. "Adrian, I am not offering a contract," he said. "I am asking a question."
Will you marry me for real? No cameras. No lies. Just us. For a long moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then she nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "But only if I can pay for the flowers myself." He laughed, relief and joy breaking across his face. "Deal." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the customers in the shop began to clap, realizing what they had just witnessed. Outside, the first petals of spring drifted across the sidewalk like confetti. Later, as they closed the shop together, Adrian looked at her and said, "Home is not a place, is it?" She shook her head, smiling through happy tears. "No. It is a feeling." He kissed her forehead gently. "Then I am finally home." And under the golden light of the setting sun, the woman who once sold flowers to survive stood beside the man who once owned the city, both of them finally free, finally real, surrounded by the scent of love that money could never buy.